Good morning, everybody. My name is Jordan Huggins. I will be your moderator for today's New Realities Talk, where we will be discussing working remotely in the era of social distancing. First of all, I just want to thank everybody for if you came to any of our previous three New Realities talks, the response was overwhelming, and we have you to thank for that support. It was so overwhelming that we've decided to do three more talks. So I just want to thank you so much for joining us for the first in this second section of three talks. A couple of housekeeping notes from me today. If you the webinar will run approximately 30 minutes. We're going to leave plenty of time at the end for a Q&A. We're actually going to mix it in a bit. So if you'd like to submit any questions, then you can do that via your GoToWebinar portal. There's a little drop-down menu item that just says questions, and you can submit those directly to Don and Emily, and I will ask them at the end of the webinar. We will also, this is a bit of an interactive webinar, we'll be running some virtual and visual polls via a website we love called Mentimeter. If you would like to participate, it's not required, but we would highly encourage everybody to participate. And if you would like to, then all you need to do is open up an internet browser tab to menti.com, menti.com, and when we get to the slide, there will be a code that you can enter into the web browser, and it will take you to the poll question. I will be sure to send you all of that same information. I will chat everybody, the URL and the code. Again, that is menti.com if you would like to participate in our polls. Finally, if you have any technical issues, you can message me directly via the chat box, the drop-down chat box. Now, that is enough from me today. We are very lucky and honored to have our Executive Director of Consulting, Don Howard, and a senior consultant here with Alvanon, Emily Robertson-Hood. Don, Emily, why don't you guys go ahead and take it away?
Thanks very much, Jordan, and welcome everyone. Emily and I are delighted to be here with you today. And yeah, so working remotely in the age of social distancing, wow, so much has changed in the past few months. And for many, everything really has been turned upside down. Um, for some of the changes, we might have been prepared, but for many of the challenges that came our way, there was a very steep learning curve and a lot of creative problem solving going on. So not the least of the challenges, of course, is working virtually and keeping the product development and fit approval process moving along. Isn't that right, Emily?
Well, the good thing about the apparel industry is that working virtually isn't new to us. We've been working virtually with overseas vendors for years. Now, working virtually with 100% of your coworkers is new for most of the industry.
That's true. And we like to check in with our business partners on an ongoing basis, both large and small brands. And we've been doing that in a very focused way over the past few weeks. We asked individual companies how they're coping and staying connected and getting work done in these challenging times. And today we'd like to share some insights from where we sit and what we're really seeing is going on right now. So this session is a chance for us to offer some constructive thoughts for you that we've heard for managing through this period. And we know that now more than ever, it's super important to stay connected and share how we can work through these really unprecedented times. So as Jordan mentioned earlier, we'd also like to make this session somewhat interactive by doing a couple of poll questions. So if you choose to participate, your answers will be anonymous. We'll be using Mentimeter, as Jordan had mentioned. So if you want to participate and share your responses, grab your phone and go to www.menti.com. That's MENTI.com, and get ready for a few questions. Okay, we're going to get to that in a few minutes. So, having said all that, in addition to the individual brand meetings, we also conducted several video conference calls with groups of brands together. It was kind of fun over the past 2 weeks and had some open discussions. And we used Menti to help capture the top challenges that brand development teams are facing right now as they try to keep their businesses on track. So what you're looking at here is an aggregated chart of responses, the top 10 things we heard, and how they were ranked by the participants. And as you look at them, they probably look very familiar to you, right? Not surprising. Access to the live fit model, getting samples, and access to the fit form are the three top challengings. But back to the working remotely part, it was kind of surprising to me that number 4 was household distractions, right? So there's no meeting that goes on today without the dog and the cat and the kids somehow participating. Getting decisions made kind of surprises me because it's right there in the middle. So decisions are getting made, so it's not the primary problem. But then the other one right below that, I'm sure most everybody is feeling, and that's that kind of feeling of isolation, not being around your teammates, or if you like going into the office, that feeling of being together. And then kind of lower on the list is not having like the tools, the software, access to a dedicated computer, and of course the loss of structure. So we thought these were kind of interesting, and we're going to go ahead and look at some of the creative and scrappy ways the brands have approached these challenges. Now, while we continue to walk through these topics and discuss these workarounds, we'd like you to weigh in on how these challenges are affecting you. So this is our first Menti poll. So as you see, if you didn't get the address, the www.menti.com, and there you'll get a code that comes up, 687728. We're going to also show this code in the chat box. And so please feel free to vote. We won't show the results as they come in, but we're going to get back to them later and show you the responses from this audience. So go ahead and continue. It would be nice to see one person vote, but I guess we can move on from there. So feel free to enter your responses. Okay, here we go. So Emily, we'll continue to collect those responses, and let's kind of talk through some of these subjects one by one.
Okay, we will do that indeed. All right, so thanks for participating in that. So, obviously one of the top ranked things is getting physical samples. And if you think about the development process, after we've launched a tech pack, we anxiously await samples. Getting access to the samples in this way of working right now is really challenging, but we heard a few kind of scrappy ways of working that people are approaching this. So we've heard of something now that is a new thing. Colleagues will share samples between themselves via a doorway or driveway drop. This doesn't involve any physical contact, just a text to let your colleague know that you've made the drop. We don't want porch pirates getting their hands on these, so getting out and grabbing them quickly is pretty important. Another option is to courier samples between colleagues. It's another set of hands on a package, so this might lead to the next step we've heard about, which is people setting up isolation stations in their garages. There they set the bag of samples for 2 days so that it can sit and sort of dissipate. If you have a family member who's at high risk, this might make sense since we're all working in very close quarters at home. This is also good for samples coming directly from the source base.
And yes, of course, if you're familiar with the Alvanon methodology, a critical best practice method for development, of course, is using blocks. And a good block program ensures a greater level of fit consistency. So as a rule, brands who have already implemented blocks have seen substantial reductions in the normal sample rounds in normal times. But during this work from home time, brands that have a strong block program in place have been able to allow block-based product approvals to occur, in regional hubs. So if they weren't already working that way. And of course, this alleviates the need to send any samples to begin with. Typically, the hub can approve via the keep sample. and just to keep that process moving along, and then send a reference garment to the brand. So in that way, of course, there are fewer literal touches, which makes it a good option.
You know, I love blocks, so that's something I strongly endorse. So good to hear people are doing that. Another thing that was great to hear is that people are beginning to use 3D, is sometimes just as a first look at protos. Even if they don't have a 3D system, their suppliers might. And with this 3D review, you can determine if the sample is okay enough to be fitted. Can the supplier send it to the brand, or does it need a complete redo? Again, the goal is to keep the process moving. So, access to fit forms has proved to be a big challenge for some people, and they've met these challenges in a couple of different ways. We heard that fit teams, the fit forms have gone home with team members as much as possible. This happens to be a photo of my fit form sharing studio space with a really big dog. And as long as she doesn't wag her tail, we're going to make it work.
Yeah, we know of many examples of people, taking the fit form home from the office. We heard one kind of amusing story of someone who went to the office to pick up their plus size form, but it didn't fit in their car. So I think they had to get alternative means of transportation. But in some circumstances, depending on what region you're in, brands still have been able to go back to their offices on a limited basis and fit the product there again via video conference with their colleagues. But this was not happening for the majority of the people that we spoke with.
Yeah, and what's interesting is the people that actually have the fit form seem to have an elevated responsibility within their team. So if you share a fit form with somebody on your team, you might be attending virtually attending the form fittings and taking all the fit form photos for your colleague. In the case of a big team, that holder of the fit form will sometimes attend fittings for the colleague's product category. So they may be actually spending more times in fittings than usual.
Yeah, that's very true. And back to the fit forms, another interesting development we've seen is from an Alvanon point of view is the request to reroute new forms that were already on order directly to the key team members' houses, right? Rather than send them to the brand headquarters. So there's been a lot of activity on that front. So obviously, fitting on the fit form is ideal if you have one and if you actually have access to it.
Right. So as we saw in our compilation of responses, model fittings has been super challenging for people. But again, people will find a way, and brands have figured out how to continue their live model fittings. So many of the brands we spoke to are sending their samples to the fit models who are also at home. This is nice because the fit models remain employed. So that's kind of a nice thing too. So the fit models themselves have been able to take photographs and make product comments for the technique members. So if you've trained your fit model to be a good commenter, this is really, really useful at this time. They can hold virtual fittings with the model and also get photos or comments via email. So using technology and hands-on to our advantage. So some tech team members have also been able to pre-fit samples and get adjustments pinned in before they send their sample to the models. This is when having the fit form at home is really super useful. And lastly, as much as we don't recommend it, we are hearing of samples being fitted on spouses, kids, and on ourselves. And we all know that this is not a best practice that will contribute to consistent fit, but atypical ways of working have become really more common to us all.
Yeah, it's a lot of improvise and a lot of compromise. And of course, the ubiquitousness of the virtual meeting now, you're seeing more of your colleagues probably than you did before via technology that enables these virtual team fittings. So, we've heard brands that are using new or multiple technology platforms to hold virtual fit sessions, and a lot of these things weren't intuitive. So you're getting up to speed and being tested on things like Zoom and Teams. I know my consulting team jokes that sometimes we're in 4 or 5 different platforms during a day with different clients, and it is a bit of a learning curve there. But also, several of the big brands we talked to have had, the obvious VPN connection issues. IT departments are scrambling to provide tools and access. And I'll tell you, for a lot of us, our IT people have become our lifeline to getting work done. So thank you, IT, and our team, that's Raj, but thanks, IT people. You're helping us keep rolling. Um, Also, some useful tips and tricks that I'm sure a lot of people have figured out is if you want to get a really good, big, clearer view of the product or a fit form or anything, it's been useful to connect your laptop to your home TV, like with an HDMI cord to get a bigger view. But of course, I guess if there's one TV in the house that might not be very popular with other family members, but so maybe schedule your time for that. And in general, most teams are making do with less, right? Fewer resources, the processes are becoming leaner. It's going to shape how we work in the future. Or as one of the brands made a comment during one of our sessions that says, really, this is how we should be working. So kind of some interesting takeaways on that. So, Emily, let's look at some of the results here. So, those are the top ways we've heard people doing their jobs. And thank you all for voting. We got 84 responses. Awesome. If you still want to play the game, you can, I guess. Let's see what the top challenges are for those of you on the webinar. Let's look at the poll. Okay, so, wow, interesting. So, getting samples and access to the live fit model, top 2 responses. Household distractions is really resonating with a lot of people. And I don't care what industry you're in, if you have a new office mate that has a job in a different industry or sector, you're probably being distracted by them. So yeah, that's got to be a big one. Access to the fit form, interesting. Number 5, Emily, isn't that interesting?
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of people have for years and years and years gone in, done a certain thing at a certain time, and it really does, move your cheese, as it were, when you have to do something a little bit different. It can throw you for a loop.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things you can do about that is creating your own schedule and trying to be disciplined about it. But yeah, that's important. Feeling isolated is still up there for people. Getting decisions made doesn't seem to be as big, and it's probably because people have to make decisions on their own and they don't have to go through this entire chain of authority. So that might be an interesting byproduct of this. And then software and access to a dedicated computer, really interesting. So thank you all for participating in this. We love Mentimeter. We use it in our workshops. It gives us a chance to see how you're feeling and you're thinking, and every group's slightly different. So, all right, Emily, what's next?
All right, you're going to tell us a little bit about the last question we asked our colleagues.
Oh, right. 3D. So you can't get away from this one, and probably never will. Um, we asked the brands, how would 3D help your brand? If you're not in 3D, if you're thinking about 3D, if you're in the middle of 3D, how does it look different right now? Of course, we've got brands that have made great strides working in 3D. Others haven't started their journey, and many are somewhere in between. But one thing that's become abundantly clear during this crisis is that we need to take 3D seriously and soon. So what's happening now, a lot of it depends on the type of product, right? So 3D might enable virtual fittings and approval. And again, back to that block-based product being a really good way to use 3D. And some of the other things we heard, many brands are, of course, using 3D for sales tools, merchandising, line planning, colorways, of course, development teams able to scale prints and patterns and graphic placement. That makes a lot of sense. You can do that right now. And if you're further along in 3D, what we're seeing a lot of right now is being able to see every size in your range using size set avatars, which makes a lot of sense. And let's face it, it's in the best of times, it's hard to find people in the office that are a size in the range. Certainly you're not going to find them working from home. So we also know that suppliers are really driving 3D. They push for it. In fact, most are working in it right now. So we've heard a lot of brands that themselves are not maybe in 3D in their product development process, but they're being able to leverage the vendors' 3D capabilities to help them make decisions and help that process move along. So, if you don't in fact have 3D, you're able to leverage it for your use via your vendor. And of course, brands have commented now that it's a great time to push for 3D if you don't have it, for leadership to understand really how that could make your process go so much faster. So again, we've seen isolated cases for the people who are really knee deep in 3D. They have fewer distractions at home right now, so they're using this time to refine their skills and update or develop protocols in 3D. So again, all of these things are excellent ways to move forward in 3D now and when this passes over. So here we go again. The chart you're looking now is when we asked all of the different groups that we talked to, how does 3D look to you now? If we need to work this way in the future. And again, these are aggregated responses, the top 10 that we heard. And we're going to now find out what this group thinks about 3D. So this will be our second and final Menti poll question. So again, if you're already in there, go back to your www.menti.com and enter the code 286246. And we'll also again show that code in the chat box. And again, you can answer as many times as you'd like. But again, the key here is how might you use 3D in the future? And if you're already using it now, how can you leverage it going forward? So we see one response coming in. So I'd like to see some more roll on. And oh, good. Okay, we've got some people participating. So Emily, I think we're ready to do some Q&A. Is that right?
Yes, we are. So let's go to that then. All right. So Jordan and our colleague Tracy, who's taking a look at the questions, what do you have for us?
Hey, Don, Emily, thank you both so much for that. First part, really great. Yeah, we have a lot of really good questions coming in. I'll start with this first one. Really good question from Allison. My company is asking technical designers to approve fit by using only 3D images. Many of us are uncomfortable with this. Do you have any advice on this?
Well, we have lots of thoughts on this for sure. That's a great question. In all honesty, we have heard that if the product is in a block-based environment, so you've used a tried and true block that you have developed or you developed in partnership with your supplier, that is probably the best candidate for approving things 100 fit 100%. And this would be things like men's shirts, like graphic tees that come from blanks. So perhaps kids wear that is the same, and you're just mixing up the patterns and colors. There are some products like extremely complex outerwear. We work with many brands that have very, very complex functional product that it's going to be more challenging. So at this juncture in the development of 3D and where brands are, we strongly suggest that you pick and choose where your wins can be, with the goal of perhaps doing 100% in the long term when you work out the kinks. So get some wins on things that are doable and then merge into more complex products as you get a fluidity and as the tool evolves. Don, do you have any other thoughts on that?
I totally agree. And the thing is, it's all about your underlying standards in place. If you're trying to approve something that's come from a place you don't know where it came from, it's very risky. It also has everything to do with your brand's version of what a standard is and how important fit consistency is. So it is a loaded question, but we do know that people are able to fit the right type of product in 3D, and it just serves as a learning, that you can build on that win, as Emily had mentioned.
Great, really great. Thank you both for that. This next question comes from Donette. Her comment is decisions about, I think she seems to be struggling with the decisions about what product to pause on versus which product to continue developing on can be a challenge. Don, Emily, do you guys have any advice on how you can approach this?
Well, we hear a lot of brands that are obviously re-looking at their assortments and their planning for the future. So, it really depends on what your brand strategy is for what product is going to come to market next and when. Some people edit it down to, we've seen brands editing down to kind of the the keep the lights on product, kind of the standard product that they would always have in the store, maybe your key item programs and so forth, maybe not so much novelty. But again, that's going to be dependent on the brand's strategy for the when and if product flows again.
It's also a fact of life that as stores have been closed, we've got DCs all over the world sitting full of product.
Hmm.
So, balancing it with what product is waiting to come in is another thing. So it's a chemical mix, I think, of what your brand strategy is going to want to put forth.
Excellent. That's an excellent point.
Great. You guys, I know you guys have some more you wanted to cover. You want to do maybe one or two more questions?
Sure, go ahead and a couple
Okay.
more questions, and then we'll get to the Menti results for the last
So,
question.
sounds great. This next question comes from Kylie. With the upcoming need for 3D to move along development sampling, is Alvanon working on any improvements or upgrades to help support the tight to body, such as bras, intimate swim sectors, which currently struggle with accurately fitting on 3D avatars due to the hard body attributing?
Well, of course, we continue our R&D efforts in that area. The reality is that the physical form is hard, and our current methodology for working in 3D is for the 3D avatar to be a literal replica of the fit form. So as the technology advances in our ability to create more human-like attributes on that physical form, they're likely to be translated into 3D. That's a tough one to solve. I don't think anyone has, but we continue to work on it and push the boundaries of what we think is going to be feasible in that environment.
And the other thing that is really interesting to note is I still think that 3D software development entities are very interested in brand feedback and will incorporate that in there. So some of the heat mapping that we see being done in order to figure out compression or ease over body are super useful. And of course, it's never going to replicate the human body 100%, but we need to think about it not replicating, but being yet another tool too. So if you have needs for products along those lines, I would definitely make yourself vocal to your 3D provider, or if you're considering a 3D provider, really query them hard and heavy on that point as you're looking into that particular software. So Don, shall we go back to the Menti results and see how we're doing there?
Absolutely. Let's take a look. So the question
Alright.
was, how does 3D look to you now? What would be the best use of 3D for your brand? It looks, oh wow, 78 people responded. That's awesome. So Emily, tick through some of these.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that people right now have a comfort level with aesthetics. And that would be prints and patterns, scaling, color blocking, logo placement, graphic scaling, et cetera, et cetera. Aesthetics, for sure. I think many people are doing that, and that is where their comfort level is. And once again, you go to any of these 3D webinars, and they for sure say, look for places where you can get some wins. Some fitting, absolutely agree. And like Don and I talked about in the body of this, is we have seen people at least being able to do first look. And doing first look at least is better than not having a first look at all. Speed is obviously one thing that will come over time. I mean, as Don and I have talked about before, and my colleagues, this isn't plug and play. It's something that you need to build up to. If you remember when you were just getting used to Excel or when you were getting used to your CAD system, speed is something you build up with fluidity. Don, what else do you see?
Yeah, let me jump in here. The speed thing, another thing that we know for sure, the single biggest impediment to speed to market is decision making. It's proven itself over and over again. So in the sense that 3D can help improve the decision making process, speed is certainly a great byproduct of using 3D. Sustainability, there's not any brand who doesn't have a sustainability mission or program, at least in name or title, but clearly reducing the number of samples you need to get to approval, something we feel very strongly about, and sustainability is a wonderful byproduct of that. I can just go down. One of the things that I'm surprised at is that the bottom of the list is the need for better 2D first. Many people think you just jump into 3D and it's like pixie dust or it's magic. If you don't have your 2D foundation in place, and when we refer to that, we're specifically talking about fit consistency over time with your product. If your 2D house isn't in order, it's almost impossible to be successful in 3D. Emily, anything else you'd like to add on that?
No, that is really, really true. And I do know that this is not a brand initiative for everybody. It is an Uber brand initiative for some. We talked to a couple of people who said, uh-oh, we've let loose a monster with this virus. Our leadership thinks we can flip the switch on 3D tomorrow, and we're worried because we know what the ramp up is. And then there are brands that this either doesn't work for them or whatever. So for those brands, yeah, sure, I get it, absolutely. I still make patterns on the table here. I absolutely understand that.
And that links back to, I think, the first question we had about someone being trepid about being forced to approve in 3D. That's a complicated question, because there's way too many variables in that question to know what the right answer is. But hopefully we've given a couple of examples here about what might need to go into that decision-making process.
Yeah, so let's go back to where we were here and just maybe around 3D, perhaps there are questions that people haven't asked yet. So Jordan, Tracy, if you see any additional questions around 3D, do let us know.
Definitely, there are quite a few coming in still. This next one is from Jesse. The brand I work for has no incentive to switch to 3D fittings yet because they don't believe in 3D modeling. One of the reasons is because it doesn't allow you to see the factory workmanship, handling, and their ability to manage spec and shrinkages. Can any of these concerns be mitigated using 3D tools?
Well, yeah, go ahead, Don.
No, Emily, you go ahead. We're both jumping on each other here.
Well, we both have so many opinions, which is, if people know us, they know that that's just how it is. Well, what's true is that, yeah, you know what, I get that completely. You do need to see the physical sample in some way, unless you have certified your supplier. So there are a lot of brands that have been in a relationship with a very trusted supplier for a long time, and they feel like, okay, we've really laid down the law, and we have incentives, or we have programs or certifications around the way we expect product to be made. If you deviate from that, we're going to start to pull programs from you. So if you're working with a certified vendor, or if you want to put a certified vendor program in place, that's probably the best way to ensure the workmanship piece of this. Don, what other thoughts did you have?
Yeah, and the thing is, we don't want to imply that 3D eliminates all sampling, because I don't think, I mean, there might be areas where it's working with people who make t-shirts and blanks and that kind of thing. But if you're of any kind of volume, you're seeing a sample. The goal is to only see one. And we have brands, and we'll refer to this, talk about this next week, but we have brands that are having fit approvals on the first submit in the 90% of the time. So yes, 3D is being used along the way, but they're still going to see that end sample. So I mean, and I don't know of many, and Emily, if you can think of anybody who actually does nothing but 3D, they might be out there, but it would be, I would imagine, few and far between.
Right, exactly. Agree on that. Jordan, anything else on 3D then?
Great, yeah. Yes, Emily, there's a couple more questions here. This next one is from Gianna. What would you say is a realistic time plan for getting techs fairly proficient in 3D after achieving a proficiency in 2D pattern making?
Don, do you want to take that?
I mean, I'm assuming that's as a user, an individual user.
I believe so, yeah.
Well, I guess the appropriate amount of time is when you know you're getting good at it, because there's going to be a learning curve. Some people take to it fairly quickly. Some people, we do a lot of work in 3D here. We have a super user. We have a couple people in 3D, and starting to perfect the use of creating blocks. So it just takes time, but you'll know you're there as you prove concept, which everybody has to do. You have to prove concept. And what I mean by proving concept is eventually there is a physical sample that you can go back to your work in 3D and do the, apples to apples comparison of what you're seeing. So for an individual, it would be hard to say. And also, obviously, how much time you have to devote to it. So many people have their day jobs and they're trying to get up to speed on 3D. And, it's really a challenge unless you have a really dedicated amount of time in your day to be learning this. It takes a while. So again, all those things together, we even mentioned it earlier about, a good use of your time. Now, if you are in 3D, is to kind of hone in on your skills and use this time to get better at it.
Yeah, and I think when we did our digital safari, when we went knocking on doors brand to brand to figure out their ramp up time into 3D, they were planning for 3 to 5 years by the time they'd chosen it, gotten it in-house, gotten the equipment, chosen super users, chosen a product group to get good on. I would love to hear that number's gone down, and that's something we're going to continue to ask about.
Mm-hmm. Jordan, maybe a couple more questions, and I think we'll be ready to wrap it up.
Yeah, sounds great. So this next question, we've gotten a bunch, and it's just a question of, do we recommend any 3D programs? We have a pretty, agnostic view on that, but I actually wanted to bring it up for you, Don, because you mentioned the 2D aspect, that it's important to get your 2D in line. And we had a lot of people agree with you. And I was wondering if you could just expound upon some of the elements of 2D that do require kind of getting in line.
Well, that's a great question that we're probably going to get into great detail next week. And I'm glad people are responding to it because it all has to do with your foundational tools for consistency. That's what we mean by that. And I won't go into any detail on that now because it's something that we're going to be talking about next week.
Great.
But
Yeah.
make no mistake, if your 2D house isn't in order, you're going to really struggle in 3D.
Okay, there's one more question from Jessica. Is turn time faster in 3D versus waiting for a new fit sample?
Okay, again, turn time is relative to what you're turning the sample for. Back to the point of having fewer sample iterations. Why are you asking for that sample? Are you asking for it because you're challenged with the technical fit? Are you asking for it because somebody wants to see a different colorway or a different design detail? So it depends on what you're asking for the iteration for. The whole key to speed to market in 3D, as we said earlier, is allowing the cross-functional teams to make better and more timely decisions without seeing the first sample.
Great, thank you, Don. Don, Emily, I think that's about all we have time for. We have so many questions coming in. I just don't know if we can get to it. I don't know if you guys have any final thoughts.
Yeah, so thanks, Jordan, and Emily, thanks for doing this with me. I really enjoyed it. Today we've talked about now and how we're reacting as an industry to keep business moving forward, right? But unilaterally, we're hearing teams talk about working in a cooperative way. And the one thing that's really struck me is that how people are really kind of doing it with kindness. This can be a rough industry. There can be a lot of emotion in play. We can have a lot of contentiousness. But we've really seen people coming together and figuring it out with their cross-functional teams, and it's really kind of nice to see. So another thing, obviously we could be several weeks or more working this way, and being scrappy and learning from this experience is really going to help build our teams and enhance collaboration with our cross-functional team members. So you're going to receive a PDF of this deck, and you're going to get the Menti responses that we had to share with your team. So please, set up some time to connect on this. As we said, connecting with each other is so important right now. So connect with your teams on this subject. We hope that this was interesting and helpful, maybe some tips or ideas that you might not have thought of. Maybe it corroborates or it reinforces things that you're actually doing right now, and see how this is going to help you and work for your brand. So having said all that, another important question kind of emerges, and that's going to be, what have we learned through this period? So just want to let you know that next week we'll explore how these recent experiences are going to allow us to work smarter and more efficiently as business begins to resume. Okay, so how will we evolve in the way we work? And what are those new fundamentals that we're all going to need going forward? With that, thank you all so much. Jordan, we'll toss it back to you.
Don, Emily, thank you both so much. As Don said, please tune in next week. We have 2 more weeks of these new realities talks. Don and Emily will be discussing further update to the new fundamentals next week. And then on April 29th, we will have our very own CEO, Janice Wang, our executive director in Europe, Ton Weidenhoff, and our business development director, Jill Coleman, discussing rebalancing the global supply chain. Again, thank you all so much for joining us. If you had to tune out, you had something else going on the first half of this webinar, or if you missed any of our previous webinars, you're going to miss any of the upcoming ones, you can access all of those on our website. You can just head over to alvanon.com/category/webinars. It's the news option at the top of the web page there, and you can access all of our previous webinars, and you can sign up for our upcoming ones. If you need help, we've got a lot of questions about 3D, and unfortunately, due to the global crisis right now, people have lost jobs. If you're looking for any professional development or anything like that, I would urge you to head over to motif.org. We've actually developed a number of online Alvanon Fit courses for plus size, 3D, and a number of those are available on our free trial right now. So you can head over to motif.org. Thank you all again so much for joining us. Don, Emily, thank you guys for your time, and we hope we'll see you next week.